Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and welcome to number 14. This is the last module before the final exam. Originally, I was going to do a module on big pharma and healthcare because I thought it was appropriate, especially when we look at the enormity of big pharma as far as business is concerned and how patents are so important to the pharmaceutical industry. But I've changed my mind. I'm not going to do that. What I want to do is, since this is our last module, I want to try to look forward a little bit. So it's really unusual in a history class to talk about the future, but I think that it gives us a good basis for comparison. So what we're going to do this week, the final week, is we're going to watch a TED Talk from Elon Musk. Most of you know who Musk is. He is the person behind Tesla, but he's also the person behind SpaceX and many other ventures. He made his money, of course, in eBay and PayPal originally, and he's a very wealthy man from South Africa. So it's interesting to listen to Musk because he has so many ideas for the future moving forward, and he actually can afford to fund many of these ideas. So the whole idea behind SpaceX, which actually is one of the transports that supplies the space station. Again, it's an independent company that he started. I think you're all aware of Tesla when it comes to the electric automobile. And there are many other companies that he's involved in, like the Hyperloop system that he's planning for transport between San Francisco and Los Angeles. So what I want you to do this week is watch I think it's about 45 minutes, a 45-minute interview with Elon Musk that's very current. It took place this year. It's a TED Talk, as I said before. And I want you to think about the stuff that he's talking about and what you think might be viable and what may have the most impact on society moving forward. You know, I like to think of technology and business in terms of disruption. So when we think of the Tesla automobile, of course, the automobile that runs on electricity, or the semi-truck that he's going to talk about in his video that runs on electricity, these are certainly revolutionary inventions that will change industry and will change business. But in the big picture, they really don't change society that much. They're not overwhelmingly disruptive because they're still automobiles with wheels that run on the existing highways. That's not to say that they're minor inventions by any stretch of the imagination, but the paradigm of driving on highways remains the same. Although he talks a little bit about self-navigating or self-driving cars, and again, that's a pretty major leap from what we know as well. But just keep that in mind because I'm going to ask you some, you're going to have some discussion prompts about which one of the inventions that he is talking about could have the biggest impact on society as we know it. And again, even though the electric automobile will have a big impact, we're still driving down the same roads, and the paradigm of driving is still similar. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I think is pretty fascinating is that someone like Musk, which again, has a lot of money and a lot of investors behind him, can single-handedly take off into space. And it's interesting because SpaceX, besides being a transport for the space station, is again one of these technologies like RCA, like the railroad, like the internet to a large extent, that was originally something that came out of government funding. All of that knowledge of rocketry and how to launch and actually where to launch all came out of government funding, and now we see that changing over to private enterprise. So whether it's Elon Musk and SpaceX or Jeff Bezos and Blue Origins, there are 3 or 4 different space companies now, or companies that are building spacecraft, which are private enterprise, which are capitalists. So it's interesting to think about how capitalism comes in to take over properties that previously belonged to the government if there's a profit motive involved. And I think that Musk really typifies someone who sees opportunity with technologies that weren't fully developed by the government. It's interesting because Musk talks about the degradation of technology, or how technology stands still. So when you think about it, and he'll talk about it a little bit in his TED Talk, we had the space shuttle, we had the Saturn V, we landed on the moon in the 60s, we had the space shuttle after that, And then because of politics, really, the U.S. got totally out of the space business. So there was this degradation, or at least this standing still of technology. And I think you see that with a lot of technologies. When you look at a city like Toledo or any industrial city, and you see the ruins of factories from the past, you see how technologies, they rise up and they die off, and sometimes there's not new innovation. And one of the reasons is because under capitalism, you always have to worry about the profit motive, and research and development sometimes isn't profitable. And so you find these technologies dying after they become less profitable, and profitability is also affected by labor. So when we talk about, the Trans-Pacific partnerships, or when we talk about NAFTA, you're talking about cheaper labor costs. And again, since profitability runs capitalism, and since the business world that we live in is a capitalist business world, when things become less profitable, they tend to die. And I think that you can look at car companies like Ford and General Motors. They may not have innovated into electric cars if Toyota didn't do it first with the Prius, or certainly if Tesla wouldn't have come along to threaten their market of automobiles in general. Chevy may not have went forward with the Volt or the Bolt, their electric car offering. So think about all that stuff, because sometimes disruption in business, most of the time, disruption in business doesn't come from the market leaders. In other words, I think I've said before that to be successful in business, to be successful in anything, you have to obsolete yourself, because if you stay the same, someone will catch up with you or do something differently. So it's not only if you're building widgets, but it's also in the way you provide healthcare. It might be the way you teach something. If you don't innovate and remain cutting edge, then someone else will come along and do it differently, so you'll no longer be in a profitable position or in a leading position. So keep that in mind as you go forward, because I think that it's a good lesson that we can take away from this class. We know that the railroads, we know that the Erie Canal was disruptive in its time. It really disrupted horse and buggy, and we know that the railroad, disrupted canal transportation and took over. And at the time the railroad came out, the Transcontinental Railroad, it was as exciting and as innovative as anything Elon Musk is going to talk about in this video. And you can carry that forward. Steel was certainly a big innovation over iron when we talked about Carnegie. Moving forward to that, the telephone, the vacuum tube, any of these technologies we talked about, certainly the personal computer when we looked at Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, all of these things were brand new and they were disruptive technologies. So now, as we look into the future, as this class comes to a close, we look at people like Elon Musk, who has all of these new ideas, and they may or may not be viable. I think that, for me, the idea that Musk is talking about as far as colonizing Mars probably has the biggest potential to be a major social changer, but I don't know that it'll happen or not. The other thing to keep in mind, as someone who studies businesses, that things that were predicted to happen rarely happen, and things that weren't predicted are the things that take over. I remember growing up in the 60s and 70s, everyone said flying cars were going to be the next big thing. The phone company was working on picture phones, and that was going to be the next big thing. Neither of those things happened. Nothing like out of the Jetsons ever happened. But the internet, which really wasn't really predicted in its form, did happen, and it changed society in a big way. So even flight, if you go back to the Wright brothers, prior to the Wright brothers, no one really predicted that flight would change the way that we travel. But certainly it had a big impact. So the things that aren't predicted are generally the things that take hold. And I don't know if we can watch the Musk video and think about, hey, are any of these things really going to happen or not? So I hope you enjoy the video. Also, just a final note, and I'll probably cover this in another video, but our final exam is going to be a culmination of all of our micro quizzes put together. So if you want to study for the final exam, the best thing to do would be to go back and look at the micro quizzes. I believe they're all open now. If they're not, let me know. and look at the answers to those questions. And if you have those down, you won't have any problem with the final exam. And I'll talk about that more in a video in the final module. So that's it for now. I hope you all had a great semester. I know that I was a little slow getting back to you on some grades, but I think we're all caught up now. And if you have any questions or anything else you'd like to say to me, I'd appreciate hearing from you. So it's been a great semester. Be safe. Take care. Bye-bye.